Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here, and thank you for listening to Distribution Talk. I've been at this almost 2 years now, and I'm kind of excited and kind of thrilled at the progress that the show has made over the couple of years now. Past 50 episodes. I mean, that's a big leap. Wasn't quite sure to actually make it past 15 or 20. But thanks to you all, the show is going strong. And, every once in a while I'm asked to take a little time and do a solo episode. My normal format is where I will interview people, but is that every once in a while, it's kind of nice to do a solo conversation or monologue, I guess, with my listeners out there. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Another thing I like about this company is they do it all in-house. They take on these applications and build them into the platform using state-of-the-art Microsoft technology. No third-party bolt-ons for them. This is important because when you need technical assistance, they are the single point of contact. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. So I thought I would throw this one out, and it's based on an article that I wrote a few months back, and it actually had a little bit of appeal. So I thought maybe I would share it with my listeners here. For those of you who don't enjoy reading or don't have the opportunity to get this, a publication that has published this particular article. The topic is based on a conversation that I had with a client. He and I were working through a coaching session, and as most of you know, that's a lot of what I do. Rather than being a professional podcaster, I'm a professional who podcasts. But in this coaching session, we were, rolling through, we were talking a lot about sales information and sales data. It was something that he was struggling a little bit with the sales team and maybe how to motivate them and how to drive new opportunities in that sales team. It seemed like they were getting into a bit of a rut out there. So started talking about how to dig into business analytics. And if any of you have read any of my articles before, you'll know that I'm a self-professed data junkie. I mean, I absolutely love this. I've been in love with this extraction of data and really trying to understand what the customer is saying through their transactions. This has been something I've been following now for probably close to 20 years, from the early stages of business intelligence to now today. Boy, they're just so darn sophisticated and they're so easy to use. That's the beautiful part about it. I think people are warming up to this. Well, anyhow, this particular client of mine had invested in a business intelligence package out there, and he really does utilize it, and he loves to gain the insights out of it. And so we were talking about how we could use that to drive, some of the sales habits out there and to drive a little bit of change in the way that his salespeople were going after new business or trying to expand their business. And he threw out this little nugget. And this is one that, you get every once in a while, get that 2x4 to the back of the head. And you're like, oh, wow. Anyway, so he throws out this little nugget. He says, have you ever seen the movie Moneyball? And I'm like, well, yeah, I love that movie. And this is when it hit me. Business intelligence is very similar to the story and the premise of that story. And so for those of you who haven't seen the movie Moneyball, it's Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, great baseball movie. Just it talked about and really recapped the run of the Oakland A's and when they got really hot there for a while and they did a 20 consecutive win during a season. I mean, it was pretty spectacular. Well, the whole premise of the movie, and I'm just going to recap for a moment if I could. This GM, Billy Beane of the Oakland Athletics, realizes that the way that they're going about picking players is really not working. They've been doing it the same old way, having scouts that have been around for a long time and They would look at players, and a player looked good. It's like, oh, yeah, we should go after that player. And it was all based on guts and look good and how they perform maybe at a previous level. But there really wasn't any science to it. It was really just a whole lot of experience. And it was getting them the same results over and over and over again. And they were tired of, getting these look good players. The player would perform a little bit and then get gutted by another team coming in and pulling that player out and being able to pay them a lot more money because at the time, the Oakland A's were not a very wealthy franchise, and they couldn't afford to throw huge money at different players. So, on just a kind of a strange note, this GM, Billy Beane, runs into a young man who had come out of Yale and he was an economics major. And I think he was working for Cleveland Indians at the time. And he starts to listen. This young man starts talking about a way to evaluate players using an economic algorithm based on number of times they get on base, et cetera. And rather than the look good, the same old look good that his scouts have been talking about, he starts talking about using these analytics to find maybe less expensive and overlooked players who tend to get on base more often and pique the interest of Billy Beane because he doesn't have a big budget. And he's always looking for those little gems out there. And so he winds up that the two pair together. That the character played by Jonah Hill, starts working with this GM and they start using this algorithm to find these diamonds in the rough. Anyway, and it works out and is, in Hollywood fashion, things align and, they go to this 20 consecutive wins season and, everybody's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Still have your skeptics out there, but it was very successful, this new approach to baseball. And it really changed the face of baseball, actually, this type of analytic approach versus just that good old fashioned look good. And there's this pivotal scene near the end of the movie. And I apologize if you haven't seen it. This is a spoiler alert, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because it was such a pivotal moment. So after this successful season, they didn't win the pennant or anything, but this very successful change that the Oakland Athletics had. And this GM, Billy Beane, is invited out to Boston by the owner of the Boston Red Sox, very wealthy baseball franchise, and invites him out. And starts talking about, how Billy Beane has really changed the look of baseball and the way that baseball should be considered and the way they should be looking at their teams. And he says, anyone who's not tearing their team down right now and rebuilding it using your model, they're dinosaurs. They'll be sitting their ass on the sofa in October watching the Boston Red Sox win the World Series. And I think this was just this pivotal moment, that this acknowledgement that another way of thinking was coming to baseball. And, the owner of the Red Sox, slid a massive number at Billy Beane to come and be the GM of the Red Sox. He turned him down, but it was, proof that the concept had traction. I mean, if you had somebody like the Boston Red Sox saying, hey, we're going this direction, baseball was changed forever. So the quote really stuck with me in this reaction. And obviously it was a Hollywood, written quote, but the reaction, that thought process really stuck with me, that if we in our businesses in distribution, if we're not absolutely tearing down our sales process and the way that we just kind of sometimes lope along and we bounce into opportunities and we go call on a customer and say, hey, what do you need today? What can I do for you today? If we're not stopping and just absolutely destroying that and saying, we can't do that anymore, we're going to be dinosaurs. We're going to be kicked to the curb. We're going to be out of business. And I think that's the important lesson, in this analogy, is that as distributors, we have to think differently. Now, the beauty of this is that the data analysis and actually the data extraction and business intelligence is affordable today, and it's much less complicated than it was in the past. And most distributors have the ability to extract this information about their customers so that they can think a little bit differently and they can really think more intelligently rather than bumbling along and banging into opportunities here and there just by brute force. We can start becoming thinkers again. We can actually use this information, this past transactional information, to expand our businesses. You know, when I work with clients, I've a lot of what I do is I kind of point out that the ERP, and that's the distribution software package, is this wealth of information. It's got this information, it's been gathering information about your customers 24/7. I mean, it just keeps adding more and more critical information about the customers that you're working with. And if you don't know how to dip into that information, pull out some data and put it into a meaningful format so you can make different decisions, you're missing the boat. And so I've always, really pushed on distributors to understand that information gathering and really the data extraction in software packages. And that's really what business intelligence is all about. So if I want to apply that to the selling process, and this is really where I'm going with this, and this is the planning process as well. I think we're all kind of tired of the lack of planning that we see in our sales process. It's a lot of wasted time and energy. And yeah, do we get a few base hits? Absolutely, And do we every once in a while do we knock one out of the park? Sure. But more often than not, we do kind of stumble along. We wind up falling into the same old patterns. And that's really why we kind of champion this mediocrity. We don't really excel in our sales process. And so by using business intelligence and learning how to extract that information, you can start doing things like finding new opportunities in the current customer base. And a lot of this is what I call the opportunities report. Some people will call it gap analysis if they want to get really fancy. But when I look at it, I think we can extract information about our current clients and ask the question, how many product categories do they currently buy from us? I mean, look, it's no secret that, a lot of the product categories that we have today are a mystery to our best customers out there. They've been with us a long time. We've added product categories and we've added products over time. Maybe we haven't done the greatest job of telling our existing customers what we're doing. And so I think this is a great way to dive into the buying habits of our current customer and ask the question, well, how many categories are they participating in? And I did this with a client years ago. And this is where this idea had kind of solidified in my head that we do have this opportunity out there to grow sales by just understanding what people are currently doing and what they could be doing in the future. So I looked at some of the top customers of a particular client, and it was the profitability. When I say top customers, I'm always referring to top net profit customers. And so I was looking at some of these net profitable customers, and I wanted to do a little bit of research on how many product categories they were currently buying from with this particular distributor. So this particular distributor had 35 different product categories. When we were looking at these top customers, we recognized that most of these customers were buying somewhere in 9 to 10 different categories only. That was it. That was all. And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty generous when I ticked the box that they were buying in a category. I mean, if they did $10 in a particular category, I checked the box. So, I mean, I'm not talking about deep participation in these categories, but just slight participation. Anyhow, 10 out of 35. Hold up. At that point, I was like, man, I think we've got some opportunities here. Unfortunately, the client did too, especially their marketing manager. She said, ooh, I think we've got something here. And so we worked very hard on developing a reporting process that highlighted when we would pull up a customer, we would ask that question, how many product categories were they participating in? And armed with that information, now the salesperson that was assigned to that account would have a methodical plan when they went to talk to them again. They would target one of the open categories and they would ask the question, hey, I noticed that you're not buying this category from us. Did you know that we have it? And quite frankly, they often didn't know that my client actually stocked that product, which was a big eye opener. So that was a starting point. But also they could gather intelligence. Well, your prices are too high, or I buy this from my brother-in-law. You're never going to get that business, et cetera. But again, it was a much more intelligent way and a much more methodical way of going and making sales calls with the intent of growing category participation. This is again, something that I really have championed with a lot of clients I've worked with. It's such an easy report to put together. Just asking that question, how many categories are you buying in? Now, some of your product categories aren't going to be a fit for all the customers that you sell to, and that's fine. You can be a little bit smarter about that and realize, oh, okay, that client probably is not going to buy that. But you can start building profiles and profiles of the type of customer that you're calling on. What product categories do they tend to buy in? And, again, look for that ideal pattern you want to build to. And so with one of your customers, you can say, all right, I'm going to start building them from that 9 or 10 to 11 or 12, 13, 14. And again, this is sales direction. In fact, the client that I spoke about earlier, that was their entire sales direction. That was the marching orders. Grow category participation in our existing profitable customers. That was it. And it was phenomenal how well that worked. And so I challenge you to maybe go back and look, how can I build that inside of my company? Now, that's great for the customer that you have existing. And I think we could call that maybe an intelligent farmer, if you will. Someone who works their existing accounts to look for deeper penetration in there. And that might be, an intelligent solution to farming. But what about the hunters? What about the salespeople that love to go after the big hit and they're really good at new prospects and they're great at opening new accounts? Maybe they're not the greatest maintenance people, but they're flashy. They're going after the big wins and the big hits. So how could this data analysis, how could it help the hunter? How could we enhance their success rate out there? Well, when I was writing this article and thinking about this, I really started to think about how you build profiles. And so, in some of the clients I've worked with, we've talked about building profiles based on that type or that customer type. And so, once we have an ideal customer and the categories that they're buying in, approximate levels that they can buy in, types of products and whatnot. Once we have that profile established, when a hunter goes and sees a new prospect out there, automatically they know here are the products that I should be talking about. And here's a way to methodically get them interested because I've done my research. I've done a little bit of intelligence gathering ahead of time and I've really thought about it. And so often when you're meeting a new prospect, coming with a lot of information ahead of time makes you sound more intelligent. And that prospect is far more interested in what you have to say rather than coming on and meeting them say, well, how can I help you today? Or what do you need today? And trust me, here in 2020, people still do that. They go in unprepared and they go in and say, so, what's going on here? How can I help you? Here's what I do for a living. And they don't understand why customers do not want to speak to them. They don't want to give them the time of day. It's because they haven't done their homework. They haven't come in. In fact, it's kind of an insulting sales approach. My suggestion here is you want to do a little bit of research and you want to come in with something that you're going to lead with. And that's a lot of it's based on what have like customers done with you in the past. And those were, you draw that intelligence. So I think again, now we can develop this notion of an intelligent hunter as well. All this leads back to data extraction and using data to transform our sales process, not as I'm bumbling in and I'm going to work on my experience and my look good and who have we worked with in the past. And because I just don't think you're going to have that opportunity, especially this last year taught us that we have to be smarter. We can't just bumble on to into the customers' businesses anymore because we were restricted. One thing COVID taught us is we don't get to just bumble around as salespeople any longer. We have to actually plan our calls and we have to, learn how to use technology such as Zoom or some other platform. We have to find ways to be a lot smarter in our sales process. And I think that this is where our business intelligence and the way that we extract information can really help us be so much better and so much more efficient in our sales process. And I tell you right now, the old sales process, I think it's dead. And frankly, good riddance. If I have to sit through one more sales call, where somebody says, so tell me about your biggest challenge. What's your biggest challenge right now? I don't have time for that. And maybe that's my generation. I'm a Gen Xer. We're cynical. Maybe it's that. But I'll tell you right now, it's insulting when I get those calls that they didn't take the time to actually learn a little bit about my business. It can be frustrating, that for most of us, our businesses are out there in black and white, they're on web pages, they're out in the digital world. If somebody isn't willing to take the time to learn a little bit about my company and then reach out to me with an intelligent sales pitch. I just don't have any time for that anymore. And so, again, I think put yourself in that customer's shoes. I mean, do they really have the time to listen to your lame sales pitch here? Go in with some intelligence, go in knowing and show them that you've done your homework. Again, a lot of that comes from your current transactions. That's where you're going to get this information. So, that's Moneyball right there, and Moneyball for distribution. I'm telling you, even though it's kind of a silly Hollywood analogy there, but it really struck me as that is how we're going to transform our sales teams going forward, using intelligence and not just that look good. If you need any help out there, always, where to find me. And thank you for really helping me drive this podcast and the podcast project over the year. And I hope everybody has a safe and happy holidays. And hey, let's look forward to 2021. I am. I'm optimistic and I'm ready to rock and roll. And I hope you all are too. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.